everybody. What I'm going to show here today is how to make a procedural note generator with Reaktor. I'm new to Reaktor, and so I learned everything from a few videos and the manual. This building in primary document is pretty handy, and we might refer to that a couple of times. And this is the thing that I made, which is getting to be a little bit overly sophisticated, but I want to take it back to the basics and just demonstrate how I made the core of this thing. This one does 4 voices. We're just going to do 1 today. This one lets you pick a key and a mode and a bunch of other stuff, but I wanted to make it real simple, just to generate random notes in the key of A major with Reaktor and send that MIDI to another VST. There's a lot of things that I don't know. A lot of things in Reaktor seem foreign to me, even though I've been around audio and synthesis for quite a while. So if you know a better way, I'd love to hear about it. I'm sure there are lots of things that I'm doing wrong or could do better. So with that, we're going to get started by making a new project. And we're going to start from scratch right here. Use Reaper. There's probably a lot of more tutorials out here for how to set this kind of thing up in Cubase or Ableton, but we're going to do Reaper today. We're going to first thing we're going to do is we're going to add an instance of Reaktor, and we're going to choose Build. So this is where we're going to make our ensemble here in just a minute, but let's go ahead and do the preliminary step of adding another instrument so that we can hear something eventually when we get to that point. And we're just going to use Surge because it's free and it's pretty cool, and we're going to just find a simple little sound. That's good enough. So when our thing starts to make noise, we'll hear something. The important part here is we have to open the routing window in Reaper, and we have to send the output of the Reaktor plugin to Surge, and we do that very simply by clicking right there. Okay, so now we can actually get started building this thing with any luck. And the first step is we're going to get rid of these starting ins and outs because we don't need that at all. And we're going to add the song position MIDI in. So what this is going to do, when the transport is running, it is going to output the clock information in, as it says here, 96th notes from the song start, which is very handy, but we will have to divide that to get quarter notes. We're just going to go with quarter notes today. So that's going to be the beginning of our little machine. Now let's go ahead and add the end of it. That's going to be the note, pitch, and gate. This little block will ultimately send the note, the MIDI note values to the VST. And the way that works is a little strange to me because you have a pitch and a gate, and from those two things it builds the MIDI note ons and offs for you. So eventually we have to kind of manage the ons and offs of the notes so they don't get stuck all the time. Alright, so now the next thing is we're going to do an event watcher. It's called Event Watcher Small. It's under the debug stuff. Now, this thing is really cool. This thing we're going to kind of use it like a multimeter, because what we can do is we can plug it in into our virtual machine at any point really, and then see what's going on there. Now you can always just turn on the debug mode, and point to the wires. That's great. I learned about that a little later. But this is cool because it gives you kind of a historical data, and it gives you 4 channels. As you can see here, red, green, blue, and yellow. So you can see what's happening in sort of what order it's happening by the output up here. And you can reset it. You can turn these channels on and off. But right now we've only got one thing plugged into red, and that's the output of the song position. Now, disclaimer. This is something that I just learned just now. For some reason, this neat little song position module, which I built my whole ensemble on, doesn't seem to do its job unless it's being watched. If you connect it to this event watcher here and you hit play, you can see that it immediately starts to spit out lots and lots of numbers, which is what we want. Very cool. Stop the transport, the numbers stop. So reset it. But what I noticed earlier is my whole machine didn't work at all unless I connected this song position module either to this event watcher or to a numeric output. You can even hide the numeric output and it still works fine, but something has to be connected to this song position or it doesn't do its job. If someone knows what I'm missing, please tell me. That'd be great, because that seems really silly. But anyway, we can work around that for today. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take all of this, all these numbers that this thing is spitting out, right? And we wanted to use the modulo, because we want quarter notes. So what we're going to do is divide what's coming in by 24. So, because if 96 is a whole measure, then a quarter of that is 24, I think. And that's what we want. We're just going to do quarter notes today. Okay, so now let's plug the output of the modulo into our event watcher, and we can see that is has changed the output, but we're still getting a flood of information that we're not going to need. It's spitting out the same number many times before it goes on to the next one. And what we want to do is we want to use this. We want to use each time that the value here changes to trigger our new note. So we want to clean this up, and the way to do that is by adding the step filter. The step filter is going to take all those numbers and only pass through a value when it changes. Okay, so now we can connect our event watcher to the step filter. Instead, reset our little watcher here. So now when we hit play, what we're getting is a new number, incremental, each time a quarter note passes. So we can use this to trigger a new note every quarter note locked to the grid in the DAW. All right. Okay, now just to make sure this is doing what it's supposed to be doing, we're going to jump ahead and trigger a single note, just sort of manually, so that we can make sure things are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we're going to do that by adding a couple of these value modules. And so with our output, with our clock our useful clock tick thing, we're going to plug that into the trigger here, and we're going to create a constant, and this constant is going to be 57. And what that is, that's note value 57. That's going to be MIDI note 57, which is an A. And we plug that in to the pitch of our note module, and that, when this is triggered and this sends that value to the pitch input of the note block, we should hear that note. But we do have to do one other thing, and we have to plug a value into the gate input as well, or we won't hear anything. So we're just going to copy these two modules, paste them back in, and for the value of the gate we want a 1. So that's good. A 1 is a MIDI note on of 127. And if this were a 0, that would be a MIDI note off. And so it automatically scales between 0 and 127 based on what you put in here, between 0 and 1. So we want a 1 right now, and we're just going to use the same exact output. Whenever this thing decides it's time to trigger a new note, we're going to trigger a new note, the value of 57, and we're going to trigger a value of 1, and pass that on to the gate. Now, if we cross our fingers, with any luck, we might hear that. Yep. So it's ugly, and it's just an A over and over again, but that's what we were supposed to get at this point. Okay, I picked a different sound in Surge because that last one was a little bit obnoxious, and we're also going to change this to a 0.7 so we're not sending full velocity MIDI note ons every single time. So now we should hear our A over and over again. But it's a little less obnoxious. And they're going to stick, those notes are probably going to stick for a while until we get further down the road and we manage the note offs, which we are not doing just yet. So, okay, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use a sequencer module to sort of make an array of the scale tones in A major. And then we're going to set up a random number. We're going to choose a random number, and we're going to use that random number to determine which sequencer position and thereby which scale tone in the key that we're in, which is A major, to pass on to the MIDI note block. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to unhook these triggers and set them aside because I think we're going to need them again. Then we're going to make a new macro, okay? And the macro is a way to build, inside of a box instead of having everything sitting out here on the screen at once. Assume you know what a macro is. It's just a way of consolidating things and making them easy to repeat. And to get in, you just double click, and to get out, you double click. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some stuff inside here so that it's not all cluttering up our main view here. And to do the first thing we're going to put in is our sequencer, and we're going to use this multiplex 16 sequencer. And this one works a little differently than the others, but it's perfect for what we're doing here. And this macro is going to need an in port and an out port. And the in port is going to plug in here to the position, because the part of this ensemble prior to this macro is going to be determining what position we want the sequencer to play. We are going to create a constant here, and we are going to hard code in a 7 because there are going to be 7 scale tones. And then we want an out port This is what's going to connect to the later part of the ensemble and trigger the note. And then we want the output of the sequencer to go in right there. Okay, and now what we'll do is we will duplicate the constant, and we're going to want 7 of these. And we're going to plug in some numbers that I have written down here that correspond to the tones in A major. 57, 59, 61, 62, 64, 66, and 68. As you can see, that's going to be whole, whole, half, whole, 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 and then back to the root. So we're going to plug these guys in one at a time to the first 7 positions of the sequencer module. Like that. Okay, then we're going to go back to the main screen and we're going to wire this up. And what's going to happen is we're going to take this value trigger and we're going to set it to 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the output from our clock after we've divided it and filtered it. And so each time a quarter note comes up, we're going to send a 0 for now to the sequencer and just tell it to play what amounts to the root note, the number we have plugged in at position 0, which is 57. Okay, and so then that is going to go pass through to the pitch on the note module, and at the same time we want to use the same pulse to trigger our gate value again. Now I know that we have to have this connected if we want to see or want to hear anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in these final 2 things into the first 2 spots in our event watcher. We'll reset it. We'll turn on red and green and cross our fingers. Okay, so what we're getting is the root note over and over again, 57 on the red line, and over again we're getting our 0.7 on the gate line. So this is working as intended for the moment, and it's playing the root note over and over again. Now we're not getting any notes off yet. That'll come shortly, but at this point I think we're where we need to be. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 7, or 0 and 6, and that'll determine which sequencer position and which scale tone passes on to the MIDI out. So what we want to do is we want to give ourselves a little room right here, and the next thing we want to add is the randomizer. And the randomizer is an interesting module, and I don't feel like I have the control over this that I would like to have as a programmer. It's usually really easy to say, give me a random number, between X and Y. But this thing is a little strange. What we're going to do is we're going to tell it, we're going to give it a range of 3. So that means whatever number we pass in, it's going to give us a random number that varies up or down, positive or negative, from that number by 3. And what we're doing is we're passing in a 0. So we're going to get a number that's anywhere from -3 to +3, including 0. Okay? So that's basically 7 steps, and that's what we have. 7 positions on our sequencer and 7 scale tones. First thing we want to do is quantize the output of the random module, and we'll do that by plugging the random module in, the output of the randomizer into the input of the quantize, and then we'll create a constant here of 1. This is the size of the quantization steps, so whatever comes out of here, we're going to snap it to the closest 1. And then what we want to do is we want to add 3. And what that's going to do is bring it up to a positive number between 0 and 6. So we connect the output here, we create a constant here of 3, and that's going to give us a random number between 1 and 6. And we can confirm that with any luck by connecting that to the blue input of our event watcher and taking a look. Yeah, now as you can see, that did the trick. But I probably did a bad job of explaining that, so I'm going to try again real quick. What we're doing is we're passing a 0 into the randomizer, okay? And the randomizer is taking that 0 and picking a random number with a deviance of 3. So it could be anywhere from -3 to +3, and so with a decimal point value. So the first thing I do is I quantize it to 1. That's going to give us a number between -3 and +3, and then I add 3 back to offset for the negative values, and now we're back to getting a number between 0 and 6. The last thing we want to do here today is jump through a few hoops so that it stops the notes before it starts the next one. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to send a 0 to the gate here on the note module every time it's time to trigger a note, right before we trigger the note. So the first thing we're going to put is an order block, and we're going to connect the output of our sequencer, which I should have probably named a long time ago, to the order block. And the first thing that we want to happen is, like I said, we're going to send a 0 to the gate. And so we'll copy these two, and we'll turn this into a 0, plug the 0 into the gate. But we're actually going to need a merge, because we're going to combine a few things in here before we pass it on to the gate. So the first one is this, the 0. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Anytime it's time to trigger a note, we're going to pass a 0 to the gate to kill the last one. Okay? Then the second thing we want to do is we want to pass the note value through to the pitch. And the third thing we want to do is pass through our open value, our note on value, which we have fixed at 0.7. So what that should do is stop every note before it plays the new one. Let's see if it worked. I think it did. And that means the only note that sticks is the very last one, the one that was playing when I pressed stop. So the final thing we're going to do is we're going to take care of that. And that takes a few modules in and of itself. We're going to use the start stop. Okay, so this gives us data when the transport starts and stops, obviously. We're going to use a separator and so that we can determine which event is a stop event from the start event. So, and we're going to give this a threshold of 0 and plug in the start stop. Okay, so this is going to filter out the start events, all right? And then we're going to give it a little bit of a delay. If you just create a constant here, it defaults to 500 milliseconds, so that's fine. And then we'll plug in the low output, so only when it's a 0, we're going to pass through a trigger here. And we're going to copy these two, which is we're going to trigger a 0, just like we did up here, to close the gate. And then we're going to combine that into the merge. That's control, click, and drag to add that input to the merge there. The merge only comes, I think, with 1, and when you want to add more, you have to press control. And you can have as many as you want, I think. So now we're merging 3 things that go into this gate. One is the note off right before it starts a new note every time. Then we want the note on after we play the note. And now what we've done is we've made a switch to stop the last note when the transport stops. So let's see if that worked. Yep. And that's pretty much it. Now you can obviously do a lot with this. You can upgrade this in many ways. Mine is already a little more sophisticated and I have a number of ideas. I didn't even use any controls here today. All of these values, such as the value that we're using to determine the quarter notes, can be made into controls and then adjusted in real time. So there's a lot you can do with this. But it took me a while to get here, to figure this out, to piece this together from videos and from the manual and some trial and error. So I thought I would document this. I hope that you learned something and that it was helpful. And if you have any ideas or constructive criticism, let me know. I'd love it. Thanks.